There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, Book 2. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and a discussion with a novelist, Nina Berkhout, joining us today from Ottawa about her 2024 novel, This Bright Dust. She was my mystery guest a few months back and introduced me and all of you to this novel, and I have since read it. I absolutely adored it, and so here we are to do a deeper dive into the novel. Welcome back, Nina.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, I'm so excited to chat with you about this novel in depth now that I've read it. I just finished it a few days ago, maybe last week, and I read it chapter by chapter to my cousin on Facebook Messenger, and she loved it too. This is going to be a spoiler-free chat. We haven't planned out what we're going to talk about, but we agreed there's no need to get into spoilers to sell you on this novel. So you can watch the whole thing, and I give you my personal guarantee that there will be no spoilers. Tell us kind of the opening premise of the novel.
Sure. It's a historical fiction novel. It takes place in 1939 at the end of the Great Depression, a few months prior to the outbreak of the Second World War. And it follows the lives of the last remaining families of a farming community situated along the railway line. They have experienced a decade of very difficult circumstances. The Great Depression has impacted them quite a bit. Everyone has left the community except these few families. It's told from the perspective of a young farmer named Abels. He's got about a year left before he's going to lose everything. The bank is going to repossess his farm. He's been warned several times by the banker, and so he's trying to get through winter, make ends meet, get the crops growing, and try to pay the bills while helping his neighbors, the Wishart family. And he has known from his childhood Una Wishart, herself, her son, and her grandfather, who are living on the farm across the way. So it's really about these two families getting through winter and the growing season. Simultaneously, they learn that the King and Queen of England will be coming to Canada on a cross-country tour by train, along with William Lyon Mackenzie King. They're going to cross all of Canada, including passing by this little village, possibly, because that's where the railway line is situated. When Abel learns of this, he's very surprised that the government would have this going on and expenses going into this during a period where Canada has really suffered. So he questions the whole royal tour. But Una, his neighbor, sees it differently, and she's very excited and gets her son excited as well about the possibility that the king and queen might stop to see them. Abel and Una see it very differently. It's the story.
There's a lot going on here, and the way you explored monarchistic and anti-monarchistic sentiment in the novel through the characters of Una and Abel in particular was absolutely fascinating and brilliantly done. Where did the germ of the story come from, Nina?
I knew that I wanted to write. It's funny, I've had this question, and every time I think of it, something new pops into my mind, like where did it originate from? I
That's
think there
great.
were
Give me a scoop. Give me a
places.
scoop.
A few places. It was during COVID. I was homesick. I'm from Alberta. I wanted to get back there and I couldn't. So I knew that I wanted to write a story about home, hence the landscape and the setting. My other novels as well always end up being about the prairies. 3 out of 4 of them have been. So I do write about that area in my fiction. I wanted to write a story about a small community. After I'd finished this project and I was going through notes of drafts of ideas for storylines, I found a note that said, community in the prairies. Something comes through that area. Something happens. Is it a circus? Question mark. Is it this? Is it that? And I didn't remember having written those notes at all. It was quite a while ago. I started researching Southern Alberta. I take drives there a lot when I'm home and like to visit the small farming communities. A lot of them have little museums and oral histories. You can just go in. The doors are always open, visit these buildings and read the history of these areas. A lot of them suffered during the Depression, but also raised community spirit, and people banded together and often got through it. So I thought there's a story right there. I'm interested in that. I started reading more about it, and that is when I saw that toward the end of this period in Western Canada, when it was said the Depression was for the most part finished, William Lyon Mackenzie King said it was over, the East was doing fine. A lot of the prairies was recovering, but there were still some communities who were suffering, who had not recovered. Read references here and there about the Royal Tour happening at this period as well. And that's when they came together into a story. I wasn't familiar with that tour. I wanted to learn more about it. And so I thought it would be interesting to have the two come together in a story.
I don't really describe myself as a monarchist, but I suppose if you put a gun to my head and say, what are you? I would say, yes, I am. But really, I'm just fascinated by the royal family, always have been. And I fact checked you. It's all very accurate. There's a couple things I didn't fact check, and it didn't matter. For you to put this into the story and it not to feel like it was a research dump, it was a great achievement because it didn't feel that way at all. Another incredible thing about this was the character Abel. I was shocked when maybe in third or fourth chapter or something, I found out he was what, 27, 28? He seemed much, much older than that. He's really an old soul.
You're not the first person who said that. I'm so glad that we put his age in the second chapter because a few people mentioned that as well. I think he is an old soul. You're right, Sean. He's just worn down and worn out by their circumstances. He hasn't given up. He won't give up. But I think the years have really weighed on him. He's taking care of things on his own. His parents are no longer with him. He doesn't have siblings, and he's really taken everything on by himself. And now he's also trying to help the neighboring family who need a bit of help now and then. He's not full of energy and youth as he would have been when he was still in school. He often thinks back to his school years with fondness, those being the years that he was happiest when he was in school with Una. And the schoolhouse itself is actually in between both their farms. But yes, you're right. He's an old soul.
Absolutely. And he is a watcher. He's a person who stands back. He doesn't very willingly enter into any kind of interaction, but he does want to support the Wisharts. And there's a whole bunch of neighborly ties. Tell us about his relationship with Una. Let's limit it to at the beginning of the novel. What is his history with Una?
Sure. So they've known each other since they were kids. They went to school together. It's not giving anything away. He's always had a crush on Una. He's always been fond of her since their childhood. He always felt painfully shy around her. Part of this is due to he feels a little awkward about his physical appearance ever since he was a kid. Some of the other children would tease him. He had a bit of a stutter. He was not handsome by any means. So he just never had the courage to charm her or befriend her outwardly. He always observed her. He had feelings for her, but he was too shy to follow through with any of that. Una, on the other hand, was always very outgoing, approached him all the time, chit-chatted with him. Very opposite personalities, the two of them. They were both very good in school and would compete intellectually with each other. They would often butt heads, seem to enjoy their school teacher. They were both very fond of. She encouraged them to both try for scholarships, to go to university. That's where things fell apart with their friendship. Yes. Una ended up leaving the small town of Grayley to go to university while Abel stayed behind. She left and came back about a year and a half later with a child. Abel didn't expect that. He thought she was meant for a different sort of life than the life on the farm in Grayley. He was surprised when she returned, and his behavior toward her changed.
It seemed like he put up a wall. Things change over the course of the novel, but at the opening, there's a bit of judgment there, the mores of the day, an unwed mother. But yes, he felt she had such potential that she kind of wasted by whatever choices she made. Yeah.
That's it. And he's very wrong. Through the course of the novel, we learn, and he realizes how wrong he was to have those thoughts. He regrets it eventually, and he learns through conversations with her as they become closer during the time period of this novel. She explains why she came back. She never wanted to leave in the first place. he had the desire to leave, and he always had these ideas, what if? But he gave a lot up, so he never understood why she came back. But that changes through the course of the novel.
And what if is it should be a t-shirt that he wore throughout the novel, because he doesn't really seize the day or take much initiative, and that's not 100% true, but I said very inelegantly when I talked about this book. Like this saying that I grew up knowing, shit or get off the pot. He's
It's
a
true.
pot sitter.
He's conflicted. He feels a lot of duty and responsibility. And so that kind of takes over in his mind to the detriment of following his emotions and following through with what he's feeling for Una and what he really wants to do. Because there's so much going on in the outside world. They're trying to keep their farms going. There's talk of World War II breaking out, and everyone is glued to their radios, everyone is listening, the newspapers. It's all anyone's really talking about. And then there's this tour passing through as well. He feels torn. He doesn't know what he should be doing. His father participated in the war. Will Canada join the war effort? What's going to happen? And so that kind of takes the forefront.
Absolutely. The conversations that Una and Abel have, certainly in the first half of the novel, tend to be mostly about the royal tour and disagreeing about it. So that kind of carries on from the way that they argued or disagreed in childhood. One of the ways in which you ground that historical, maybe intellectual topic is through Una's son. It's early in the novel, so it's not really a spoiler, but her son gets very ill. He's not in the best of health. And there's some exchange between
Yeah.
him when he's very ill, and he's so excited that the king and queen might come and stop at Greyley that he extracts a promise from Abel to do something. And from then on, I think Abel, he's in a deeper dialogue within himself about what all this symbolism and pageantry and hopefulness of the royal visit might mean. I love that.
Oh, I'm glad. It does. His thoughts toward it, his feelings toward it definitely change. And that's comes to a culmination when the train is passing by and the big question of whether it will or will not stop at the town of Greyley. Prior to that, he sees how excited Una and her son are getting and the anticipation, clean the train station and tidy up the town, what remains of the town. They're worried about what they'll be wearing, their outfits, their clothing. Can they prepare some flowers, some tea, things like that? As he sees them getting so excited, he realizes that what he wants is for Una to remain happy. He doesn't want her hopes to be dashed. And so her hopes become his. At one point, there's question of whether the tour will be canceled because of the looming war. There's so much going on at the time. And so I think even just a few weeks prior, it was almost canceled. And when they heard that on the news, and Abel sees how devastated Una is, he thinks, maybe I wish it would come now, because he doesn't want to see her that upset with having it be canceled. It's like all hope is gone. There was such worry about what the reaction would be when King George and Queen Elizabeth arrived. Would there be protests? Would people be angry? Would there be violence? Or would people come together and rejoice? Would it unite Canada? Because Canada was very divided at that time. It feels these things are repeating themselves right now. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's strange, but no one knew what the outcome would be. There was so much preparation with security. There was an advanced train in case there was going to be any sort of attack or bombings, things like that. And it was quite a surprise, I think, in a lot of ways, when everyone just celebrated and came together. And thousands of people at all these stops came to see the king and queen.
Yes, I was on the edge of my seat because there was some subterranean, inarticulable stuff going on inside Abel. I never really knew what he was going to do next. He had some, not anarchists, not by any means, but certainly some kind of rebellious disgruntlement about his situation and the situation for the poor farmers with all this money being spent. There was definitely a strand of anti-monarchism and anger and vague whispering conversations on the side of this scene or that scene with other men. Maybe we should do something, and we're not going to get into any spoilers. when the train actually is approaching Grayley, no spoilers, people. You have to read the book. But I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I loved how you created that suspense.
I'm glad. I think honestly, Abel himself did not know what he would do because he felt conflicted. He wanted to confront, especially the Prime Minister, who had
Yeah,
said quite a few things about the West and about the prairies specifically that Abel wanted to address. But I think he himself did not know what he would do until that moment, that night when the train was coming.
he's doing stuff behind the scenes. He keeps surprising the reader with what he has been doing all along. He keeps surprising us, and you made him do that and really deepened the reading experience. So you didn't grow up on a farm. Did you have family who were farmers? The description of the farming life and the land and the birds and the drought and the rain and the hail, it was all so incredibly beautiful and vivid.
It was research based. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in the city. I've never lived on a farm. So it just came from a lot of reading and listening to oral histories and firsthand accounts and my love of the prairie landscape. I learned so much writing this book.
I grew up on a farm, but I was always a city boy at heart, and I learned a
Okay.
lot from reading this. This was just marvelous. Here's a confession. I have always gotten a little bit nervous when I hear that a poet is writing a novel. It might be too poetic for me. I've had to revise that opinion after reading this. Abel is a bit of a poet, and you have a few lines of verse at the beginning of each chapter. There are Abel's verses that were just gorgeous. Tell us about that part of Abel and about that part of the novel.
Sure, yeah. I couldn't resist slipping a little poetry element into the story. That stems from Abel when he's in school. His teacher, Miss Kitty, introduces the students to poetry. I think they study a poem by John McCrae. And Abel realizes that he enjoys poetry and he starts jotting little lines here and there in his scribbler, but he's a bit embarrassed about it. His teacher sees it one day and encourages him to continue. She calls them his pocket poems. They're very brief, 3 or 4 lines, and encourages him. So he does once in a while write a little bit. When he's young, he's with his father in the barn with the cows, and Abel leaves his scribbler behind. His father sees that he's writing. And even though his father didn't go many years in school, was not highly educated, he always encouraged his son with his schooling and with any of his pursuits. And so when he sees this, his father has left an old worn book on a bale of hay for Abel to find, and it's Idylls of the King, Tennyson. And so that opens a whole new world for Abel. He doesn't even know what an idyll is, and he reads it and he learns in that way about blank verse. He realizes his poems don't even need to rhyme. He can do whatever he wants. The idylls figure in this whole novel, just in the sense of the Arthurian legend. The idylls is about the rise and fall of King Arthur, of Camelot. I had fun with that element. A lot of the characters and some buildings are inspired by the Arthurian legend. Abel is Arthur. The grandfather Merle is Merlin. The little boy is the young Arthur. Una is Guinevere. There's another character who comes later in the storyline. He's a Mountie. His name is Lewis, and he's Lancelot. There's the element of the Holy Grail, which in this story is a gold bar that's supposedly buried. It's a story his father invented. The grain elevator at one point is like Camelot. So little allusions to the Arthurian legend. At one point, Abel sticks an axe in the ground on the farm and he can't get it out. That's Excalibur.
I got to
There's an
reread.
owl as well, the burrowing owl. It was just a fun thread to weave through that was tied into poetry, to the Arthurian legend, and the British side of it.
Now, it just occurs to me I'd like to get maybe 4 lines of the poetry. I'm very happy to read it, or I would invite you to read it if you would like to read it. What
Oh,
would
go
you
ahead,
go
Sean.
ahead? I had forgotten that one of the epigraphs is from Tennyson, Idylls of the King. You pronounce it Idylls or Idols?
I pronounce it Iddles, but I've heard
Yeah,
both.
I've
So,
heard both, and I looked it up when I was reading this to Mary Jean. I think one is British English pronunciation, the other is American English. So I'll
oh, go with
use,
British, definitely.
you said Idylls, right?
Oh, yes.
So this is from Tennyson's Idylls of the King, and this is one of the epigraphs, which is extremely appropriate. I hadn't revisited it after I finished the novel, but it is, "Our hoard is little, but our hearts are great."
That encapsulated the people of Grayley, Abel and Una, those who stayed, who stuck it out, who had nothing.
There's a little sample of Abel's poetry. This is the three-line verse at the beginning of chapter 3 that is just gorgeous. "I dream of a life with you where dust turns to swallows and we speak freely." That's a good segue into one of my last questions, or my last question. Abel's stutter, it plays a pretty important role in the story, and with all of his questioning and cynicism about the royal family, he shares a stutter in common with the king. Talk
Yes.
a little bit about that, or where that came from, or why that was an important part of the story.
That was one of those happy accidents in writing where it just magically happened that I was writing this story. Abel had this speech challenge and it had already been written. I hadn't read, I guess, that much about King George and Queen Elizabeth yet. It wasn't deliberate. It wasn't intentional, but then I realized, wait a minute, do I remove it? Do I take it away from Abel, or do I make the link with the king and with himself? And then suddenly there's this one commonality which he thinks about and which comes into his mind every now and again, even as he's kind of being grumpy about the royals. There's that one piece that he thinks, I wonder what the king does when he has trouble speaking. What kind of exercises does he do? So he thinks of the king in a different light because of
Absolutely.
that.
His challenge with his speech impediment, with stuttering, you introduced the psychological aspect of it in a way that was really eye-opening for me, and it just dovetailed. I'm just getting started on reading a biography of Somerset Maugham. It's written by a Saskatoon scholar called Willie, The Life of W. Somerset Maugham, and the author is Robert Calder. He's now a retired English professor, and this biography won the Governor General's Award for Nonfiction in the late 80s, I believe. And
Wow.
I'm reading it so that I can interview him about it.
Oh,
But I didn't
wonderful.
know that Somerset Maugham had a lifelong stutter
I
until I
did.
read this. His friends and people he was really close to are quoted as saying, when he was just with me, he never stuttered. But when he was around
Absolutely.
people he didn't know
Yeah.
so well or in public, it became almost uncontrollable. When he would just sit and having a drink with me, the stutter disappeared. And so, yeah, that all kind of
Yeah.
dovetails with some of the things that you explore here.
Yes, that is what I read as well. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that tends to happen.
Ah,
I also subconsciously probably have that with Abel because I wanted to in this novel focus less. I didn't want it to be dialogue heavy. I feel that I've done that in the past with my writing, and I wanted to focus more on description and what is going on internally with the characters in their minds, their thinking. I didn't want it to be dialogue. That was just a challenge to myself. And that was one way to scale back on him talking a lot.
I've always loved the title of this novel, This Bright Dust. And now that I've read the book, it couldn't be a more perfect title. Is there anything more you'd like to say about the title?
The title is always a fun and interesting part of the process with your publisher. Often you'll have a title and it's not what the book ends up being. With this one, I think we had 2 or 3 pages of titles
Oh,
going back and
wow.
forth. And yeah, the original wasn't, I'm so grateful to my editor and my publisher because they saw right away the original was not going to work. And so we did a lot of brainstorming. This was one of the ones on the list as we brainstormed, but it certainly wasn't the original title. But I think that this alludes to the strength of the characters, the strength of the community, and how they really tried to hold on to the good, stay positive, no matter how corny that sounds, during the difficult period. And just physically, these storms, when they're described, when you read about them, when you hear the accounts of them, people talk about the light, how they can be infused with a certain light, even though they're so destructive, and they just devastated farms and communities. People almost were entranced by them. When I think about the storms today and what we look at in footage, there's this awe, even though it's terrifying and horrible.
Well, everybody, you should be more than sold on rushing out to your bookstore and picking up a copy of This Bright Dust. It is an absolutely incredible work of fiction. I loved it with all my heart. And Nina, thanks for having this chat with me about it.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for taking the time to read the book. And I'm a big fan, so thank you for having me.
The Japanese have an expression, kochara koso, which means it is I who should say so.
I look forward to your other guests.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sean.